Helene is now a hurricane, forecast to rapidly intensify and become a major destructive hurricane by tomorrow morning. I've got all the newest information that you need to know. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty McCranie back here at Meteo Mundo. Nice to see you on an early Wednesday afternoon. Obviously this is a special video, and coming up in this video I've got all the newest information on now Hurricane Helene, rapidly intensifying, forecast to get very, very strong, become a major hurricane by early Thursday morning with widespread, destructive, and life-threatening impacts to portions of the Gulf Coast of the United States coming up on our Thursday. So we're going to deep dive. I've got all the newest information for you. We'll also talk about some impactful weather across the Caribbean on this Wednesday as well. You know, I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section below where you're viewing from, what the weather has been like. If you're being impacted by Helene and you have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to drop that in the comment section below. Hopefully, this detailed video will cover a lot of those questions that you have. Programming note, again, I'm going to be live here on Meteo Mundo taking your questions tonight. Going to have a live stream starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We're going to talk about what's happening with Helene on our Wednesday evening. Get prepared for what's going to be a very rough Thursday across portions of Florida, the Gulf Coast, the Southeast United States in general. So we're going to get you prepared. So make sure that you're a subscriber. Make sure you have the notifications on. And I will see you live tonight here at Meteo Mundo, tracking Helene, getting you prepared starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We're going to get into what's happening with Helene right now, and the news is not good, friends. Helene is now a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 80 miles an hour. It's just off the northeast tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. You can see the wind gusts in miles an hour. It's been a very rough, rainy, squally morning for Cancun and Cozumel. Very heavy rain, rough surf and sea conditions. They've avoided the worst of Helene being just on the western side of the storm, but still some flooding, some inundation of water there in some areas, and the wet weather and the squally conditions will continue in those zones at least through the afternoon hours of this Wednesday. When I show you the visible satellite imagery, you're going to almost note that the storm almost tried to dip back to the south briefly here this morning. That was the storm really consolidating, and it dropped that central dense overcast slightly south, but now the storm has really gathered strength. Take a look at this visible satellite imagery. You have good outflow in all four quadrants. Unfortunately, there's nothing really stopping Helene from rapidly intensifying from here on out. The Hurricane Center is actually calling for rapid intensification, and by tomorrow morning, by early Thursday morning, it is now expected to be a major Category 3 hurricane. So as it traverses the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to be a major hurricane moving up the west coast of Florida. Again, the drier air from that trough, which was kind of holding back Helene yesterday, is gone. All of the water vapor imagery, it just shows you how massive this storm is. And the sea surface temperatures out ahead of this are running about 29 to 31 degrees Celsius. That means, you know, we're kind of bumping on 90-degree Fahrenheit water temperatures here. So let me give you the newest information as of the 11 o'clock advisory. And there's so much to go through, but let's just talk about the main things. Winds are 80 miles an hour, so Category 1 hurricane now. Moving to the north-northwest at 10, but an increase in forward speed is expected throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening, and then a rapid acceleration on our Thursday. Pressure's down to 979 millibars. This storm is deepening. It is getting stronger. And again, it's located about 85 miles right now to the north-northeast of Cozumel, Mexico. So that's what's happening with the storm right now. We've had feeder bands extend back into Grand Cayman, central and the western sides of Cuba. Again, wind gusts there are stronger, well away from the eye on the eastern side. So the eastern side is certainly the strongest side. And unfortunately, that's where Cuba and Grand Cayman and the Cayman Islands in general, the central and the northwest Bahamas and Florida all lie. Now, let's talk about the track for a second. Again, later today, it's forecast to become a Category 2. Don't look at that time. That was the last full advisory from the Hurricane Center, but just look at the winds. So by tonight, winds of up to 100 miles an hour. At this plot point by tomorrow morning, it's already a Category 3 with winds of 120 miles an hour. And the forecast right now, right there, that number 3, is a landfall just after 7 p.m. tomorrow night, Thursday night, with winds of 125 miles an hour with gusts up to 155. That is deep into Category 3 range. The forecast track right now has a center line in the eastern panhandle of Florida near Carabel, Sop Choppy, very close to Tallahassee, which when you draw a line is not that far from the coastline, as far west as Panama City and as far east as the Perry Cross City area here. And again, this is more than likely where we're going to see landfall. It has slightly nudged off towards the west by just a little bit, but I promise you, friends, outside of that actual zone where that eye moves on shore, bobbling back and forth 10 or 15 miles is not going to matter in most areas because of the size of Helene. Let me just pause this for a second. I mentioned it in yesterday's video as well. Helene is going to be in the top 10% of size of storms. And I mean, I'm being very conservative. From a west to east here, some of the feeder bands could even be getting into Andros, but over 750 miles wide, okay? This is a massive storm. The impacts are going to be felt widespread, and they are going to be extremely severe and in some areas life-threatening. So again, outside of the core eye winds, exactly where it moves on shore, a subtle shift in the track east or west is not going to have a significant difference for the majority of the people who are going to be impacted by this storm. Let's talk about the watches and warnings that are in play, and there is a ton of them right now. So I'm going to go over those watches and warnings that you see. Here we go. We have a hurricane warning from Anclote River to Mexico Beach in Florida. A hurricane warning is still in effect from Cabo Cotoche to Tulum. That does include Cozumel. We have a hurricane watch in effect for the Cuban province of Pinar del Rio. And then from Inglewood to Anclote River on the western side of Florida, that includes Tampa Bay. Tropical storm warnings are in effect for the Florida Keys, including Dry Tortugas, Flamingo to Anclote River, including Tampa Bay, west of Mexico Beach to the Okaloosa-Walton County line, Flamingo northward to South Santee River, that is up the Carolina coastline. Lake Okeechobee is also in a tropical storm warning. Rio Lagartos to Cabo Cotoche in Mexico, and the Cuban provinces of Artisma, Pinar del Rio, and the Isle of Youth. And then a tropical storm watch is in effect north of the South Santee River to the Little River Inlet. Do you see how expansive all of the tropical storm watches and warnings and hurricane watches and warnings are? That is simply a byproduct of how large and widespread Helene's impacts are going to be felt. So now let's break down the timing of all of this. First of all, again, I've got access to all this live data here at Meteo Mundo. So we're going to talk about what's happening in the here and now. The winds are already freshening up across Florida and the northwest side of the Bahamas. We've had some winds over 20, 25 miles an hour in the Freeport area of Grand Bahama. And again, things are just going to go downhill. I have the ability, of course, here to take a look at some live radar data. So let's do that. Let's start with the radar out of Key West, Florida, where again, even here in the early afternoon hours of this Wednesday, we already have some winds gusting to around 40 miles an hour in Key West, 30-mile-an-hour winds there as you get up towards Island Murata, 30-mile-an-hour winds towards the Marathon area as well. So the Keys, the winds are freshening up. And if I put this into motion, you're going to see that these spiraling bands on the northeast side of Helene are obviously turning back to the north and to the west, but we've already had some downpours coming into the southern side of Florida. And again, this is just the beginning of that. Let's take a look at what's going on right now out of the Miami radar. So that'll be our next radar stop. By the way, Boca Raton has already had a 40-mile-an-hour gust. So this is going to be an impactful storm for Florida. We're going to have very heavy rain that's going to lead to some flooding. We're going to have the opportunity for some isolated tornadoes, and even on the eastern side of the coastline, we could have some storm surge. But I am extremely concerned about the storm surge up and down the west coast and into the Panhandle and the Big Bend. For our friends in the northwest Bahamas, passing showers will continue. This could lead to a few inches of rain overall between now and tomorrow night. Watch out for some waterspout activity there. And again, just very, very fresh winds. This is just the beginning. Weather will go downhill throughout the day on Wednesday and then really go downhill on Thursday. And there's just a ton of watches and warnings that are currently in play as well. That'll be our next stop here. I did this, of course, yesterday as well. Let me bring on the watches and warnings here across the area. Give me just 1 second to find it here. So what I'm doing right now is I'm bringing on all the watches and warnings. It's going to take a second to fully load because it's such a resource hog here on the computer. I don't normally show it very often, but there is a good reason. By the way, this is all the buoy data as well. So I've got access to all the live buoy data here. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. And that's the buoy that's just off of Key West reporting a 41-mile-an-hour wind. So, you know, when I see back here again tonight at 8 o'clock, we're going to really be seeing these winds going up. They'll probably be more in the 30 to 40-mile-an-hour range in a lot of areas. And again, there's even a buoy down here that's still reporting some 40-mile-an-hour winds. So friends, take a look at this. This is what I wanted to show you here. Just the fact that you have tropical storm warnings basically in effect for all of Florida. Even towards the East Coast, we have tropical storm warnings. That means tropical storm conditions are going to be likely in places like Jacksonville, in Daytona Beach, and down towards Melbourne, and Fort Lauderdale, in Miami. All tropical storm warnings. You get to the West Coast, obviously this becomes hurricane warnings for the coastal waters. And then as you get into places like Western Marion County and up to Levy County and places closer to the Big Bend, these are your hurricane warnings. Then you're obviously going to have flash flood warnings. You're going to have storm surge warnings. There's a hurricane warning in effect for Tallahassee. And I also just want to mention, do you see all these areas in red into southwest Georgia? These are hurricane warnings because more than likely, with this coming in as a high-end Cat 3, and that's the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, deep into Georgia, just south of Macon, this could still be a hurricane. There could be extremely expansive destructive winds into south central and southwest Georgia, and then the potential for some tropical storm conditions even as far north as North Georgia, including Atlanta, portions of far western sides of North and South Carolina. And again, flood warnings and all kinds of problems could extend into the Carolina coastline as well. This is just a massive storm with widespread, significant impacts. You have to take this storm extremely seriously anywhere in these areas. And again, even the east coast of Florida could have the opportunity for a storm surge. Now let's get into the models. And again, we're going to take our time. We got no problems here. Again, we can make this video as long as we want. And I think the most important thing is to just be very clear as to what I'm looking at. Again, do you guys see these rings? This is the computer painting on the tropical storm force winds in blue. Then you have the 50+ knot winds in purple. That's high-end tropical storm winds. Then you have the hurricane winds in pink. Okay, the slight nudge west may keep the hurricane winds just off the coast of West Florida until it gets to the Big Bend. That's one decent piece of news. I told you that was the wind profile, but it's such an expansive storm, guys. I mean, it's incredibly, incredibly large. Hundreds of miles to the east, this storm is going to be felt. So I'm going to bring on the HRRR model. Now, this is the high resolution rapid refresh. This is a great model because we can use it in this part of the world. It updates hourly. So it's taking a lot of new information and putting it into these hourly reports, okay? And we'll talk about the timing here coming up as well. So gonna let this just fully run. We'll look at the reflectivity, we'll look at the winds, then I've got all the other model data to take a look at with you guys as well. So let's go back in time. Again, it cuts off here just south of the Keys, but as we pick it up tomorrow morning, we can clearly see that the center track is basically right in line with where the Hurricane Center has it as of about 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And again, the Hurricane Center already has it as a major hurricane winds of 120 miles an hour. For Florida, squally weather begins to move in. We're going to start to see some winds picking up 40, 50 miles an hour from time to time as we go through the day. These squalls that come on shore across the peninsula will have some inherent rotation, so we can't rule out a couple of brief isolated tornadoes. That's something I'll be monitoring here. And then again, on this HRRR model, we can see that landfall and moving in, maybe just slightly east of the center line, but within this cone of uncertainty, and about the exact same time the Hurricane Center has, somewhere around the 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time hour of Thursday, moving on shore. And you can see again how expansive this storm is. Look, well ahead of this, guys, we're already going to get some very heavy rain well ahead of this deep into Georgia and the Carolinas, and the flood potential for portions of Florida as well. So there's going to be a lot of urban and river and flash flooding threat that comes along with the wind and the storm surge threat across the coastlines. This is going to be a massive destructive hurricane, unfortunately, here. And again, passing along information from the Hurricane Center in their 11 a.m. discussion, they are talking about a rapid intensification with this storm, and the fact that it could be pushing Category 4 strength. It's a possibility. It's not out of the question. I hope it's not the case, but we have to prepare for a major hurricane moving into the eastern panhandle in the Big Bend tomorrow night. Let's take a look at the winds here. The HRRR has been slightly lower in wind. I have not actually looked at this newest run. Again, it updates hourly, so I'm going to be curious what it's showing. But again, you can clearly see this high resolution imagery. It's beautiful, and it's great analysis tool for us here. So let's now take a look at these winds. These are not gusts. We'll look at gusts in just a second. These are actual surface winds that it's reporting. So again, that jumps on me in time when I do that. So let's take a look at these. Again, you do have hurricane force winds. They're not as strong, right? This would be Cat 1 here rather than a Cat 2 or a Cat 3. So the HRRR and the Euro are the slightly weaker models coming on shore, okay? But just to give you an idea that even on the weaker HRRR model, when I show you the winds across Florida, there's going to be a wide expansive field of 25, 30, 35 mile an hour sustained winds, and then gusts are going to be a lot higher than that. So basically across central South Florida, you guys just need to get prepared for 30, 35 and some locally higher gusts, maybe even up to 50. And again, these are sustained winds brushing Tampa that are trying to push 55, 60. And this is the weaker model. I want to be very clear about that. These are the weaker models. If I go over to the gust product here, so these are now going to be gusts rather than just the sustained winds. Loop that back up one more time, and I'm going to show you the stronger GFS as well coming up here. Now this is the gusts out of the HRRR model, so same model, but now we're just looking at the wind gusts. And I go back here, and then we look at these winds. Now you're again looking at winds even in the Orlando area, pushing 50 miles an hour, even on the eastern coastline of Florida, pushing 50 miles an hour or above. This is why we have tropical storm warnings. And again, you get back towards Tampa, Petersburg, Bradenton, Sarasota. I think this is underdoing it, to be quite honest. I think it's probably going to be higher than that. We'll probably get some wind gusts that get close to hurricane strength up the Nature Coast as well, including Crystal River, Cedar Key. And then, of course, as it moves inland, you're going to have much more stronger destructive winds coming in. Again, the HRRR slightly weaker than most of the other models. Let's take a look at the wind gusts with some of the other models, and you'll get an idea of just, again, kind of some of the different solutions. Unfortunately, again, the HRRR and the Euro are the weakest. They still have it as a Category 1 hurricane, but most of them have this as a major hurricane, and that's going to be the kind of the big problem here. Now, again, if we're lucky, we keep the core of the hurricane force winds off the west coast of Florida because of that slight jog west overall until it gets into the Big Bend and into the eastern panhandle. So trying to keep the strongest winds away from Tampa, Fort Myers, places like that. The storm surge is the biggest problem. The storm surge and the rainfall. The winds are going to be bad enough. Now, again, you can see here on the GFS model, when we take a look at the winds, you're talking about now winds that are in that high Cat 2 to low end Cat 3. All right, so this is a little bit more in line with what the Hurricane Center has with a landfall of 125. We're pushing right around 110 here. All right, so there's a little bit stronger solution as far as that goes. Let's look at some of the other models. This is the European model. I'm gonna take myself off camera just so you can guys get a better look. This is a really slow loop. Unfortunately, I have that copyright right over the max winds, but I can tell you as the European model brings this in the exact same spot as the GFS and the Hurricane Center right there in the eastern panhandle, those are max winds of a little bit over 80 miles an hour. So it's a Cat 1 on the European model. It is not that weak on the rest of the tropical models. This is the HAFS A model. I've shown you this the last several days. Again, you can see that moving in. Time frame with all of these models is going to be Thursday night. And again, this is initializing a little too weak. That's what I'm concerned about. It's already stronger in the Yucatan Channel than what it was showing on the last HAFS A model that I was able to grab. But friends, it has winds of 151 miles an hour, and this is not gusts. These are sustained winds, and what I'm concerned about again is that presently Helene is stronger than what the half-say model is showing. So now you're looking at high-end category 4 on the half-say model. This is the HMON model. So again, it's a little bit better with what we have currently. It's still slightly weak, and on the half-A, it's coming in as a category 3, right in line with the Hurricane Center, winds of 125 miles an hour, about the same spot and about the same time frame, maybe a couple of hours later, but the evening hours of our Thursday on the HMON model. Again, max winds sustained, not gusts, 126.6, so we round that down to the 125, and that's exactly what the Hurricane Center is showing. Here's the HWRF, which again is too weak in the initial presentation of what Helene is right now. It comes in with winds of 113 miles an hour, so it's still a category 3, but it's a lower end category 3. I mean, could there be some slight weakening as it begins to move closer to shore? It's possible. More than likely it'll be strongest just off the coast, a little bit of wind shear to play with, but that's about it, guys. We already talked about how in the broader view, there's a lot of upper level divergence. Sea surface temperatures, again, upper 80s to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's bathwater in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. There's not a lot stopping Helene from getting stronger and stronger. This is probably, to be quite honest, the most important graphic to show you guys. If you live in a flood zone in any of these areas, if you live in an evacuation zone in any of these areas and you're told to evacuate, I really do hope you take that information seriously and you do so. It is your responsibility. It is your responsibility to keep up with the latest watches and warnings and the local messaging in your area, but I can't emphasize enough how catastrophic and life-threatening this storm surge is going to be. Again, storm surge is the water that Helene will be bringing with it. Take a look at these storm surge figures, and they are exceptional. We'll start up north, Mexico Beach to Indian Pass, 2 to 4 feet. You go from Indian Pass to Carabel there on the eastern side of the Panhandle, it's 6 to 10. Then from Carabel, including Apalachicola Bay, including Cross City, including Cedar Key, back down towards Chaskawiska, which gets you close to the Crystal River, Homosassa area, it is 10 to 15 feet. 10 to 15 feet, a story and a half. If we're talking about a home, a story and a half of water is possible along the coastline. It's destructive. It's life-threatening. Bottom line, 6 to 10 feet all the way down to Anclote River, then 5 to 8 for Tampa Bay, Clearwater, Newport Richey, Sarasota, Bradenton, 4 to 7 south to Inglewood, 3 to 5 including Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers area, then all the way down to Flamingo, 1 to 3 for the Florida Keys and the Dry Tortugas. And oh, by the way, we're going to get some overwash on the eastern side as well. So we're going to start to pick up a storm surge as you get Flagler, Volusia County line, that's Daytona Beach, Palm Coast area along the east coast of Florida, north to Jacksonville, all the Georgia coastline to Savannah, and then all the way up here into South Carolina. That is the South Santee River, 1 to 3 foot storm surge. It's exceptional water, especially along the Gulf Coast of Florida. Anywhere along the path and east of that center, we're going to be piling up the water in a very significant fashion, okay? Let's talk about rainfall totals, because those are going to be big as well. Obviously, when you're talking about rainfall totals, you're talking about an inland threat for flooding. You're talking about river flooding, you're talking about urban and flash flooding as well. Look, again, on the GFS model, I think it's underdoing overall the amount of rain the Peninsula of Florida is going to see. I think it's probably more in the 3 to 6 inch category with even some locally higher amounts. For my friends in the Northwest Bahamas, especially Walker's Creek, Grand Bahama, and Bimini, it's probably going to be a few inches of rain, locally higher, squalls. Can't rule out an isolated waterspout. Not as much rain south of Eleuthera, but even Nassau, New Providence, and Andros could get into a few inches of rain. Then you get to where the actual closer track is, and you're now looking at, from the Hurricane Center, 5 to 10 inches of rain and locally up to 15. But look at the flooding potential all the way into North Georgia, portions of Western Carolina, Georgia, and just into the Tennessee River Valley in general. This is going to be a massive rainmaker. It's moving fast. That means there's going to be a huge wind threat as well. Again, we could have this as still a hurricane just south of Macon, Georgia, deep into Georgia, and then still tropical storm conditions into Atlanta, into the northern sides of Georgia in general. This is going to be a very potent widespread destructive storm, as I mentioned. So talking about the rain impacts. Look, again, we're not forgetting our friends in Western Cuba, the Cayman Islands, and Northeast Yucatan. They're the ones getting hit right now. There's some flooding going on. Overall, they're going to be averaging 4 to 8 inches of rain, locally up to a foot. That is 1 to 200 millimeters, and locally up to 300 millimeters of rain. So it's considerable flood threat in those areas. If you live in these areas, we'd love to hear from you guys. Let us know how you're faring on this Wednesday. For the Southeast United States, it's 5 to 10 inches, but locally up to 15 inches of rain. Flash flooding and urban flooding will be a big issue. River flooding inland as well is going to be problematic for the areas I just covered. Then for the central and the northern Bahamas, that does include places like Nassau and Grand Bahama. You're looking at 2 to 4 inches of rain in some areas, locally higher, probably more in the 1 to 3 in most spots, but I think we could high end 2 to 4 in a couple of areas. And again, squally weather, boaters, please be aware, some seas, again, away from some of the more sheltered areas, could be running close to double digits, okay? So that's a problem, and I'll show you those wave heights coming up in just a second as well. So again, here we go. You can just see, I just want to again reiterate what's happening right now in the places that I just mentioned. You can see the heavy rain over Grand Cayman, still continuing for the western portions of Cuba, northeast sides of the Yucatan Peninsula. We've got some heavy rain that could still be trying to work its way into Jamaica as well. I wanted to also show you guys these wind vectors. This is important for the storm surge that I just mentioned. So let me bring these up. I'm going to go back over to the GFS. Well, actually, that was the GFS. All right, so let me loop this up real quick. Shouldn't take long because we don't need to get into a big loop here. Let's see, we'll go to 11 a.m. tomorrow night. Let's drop those. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because I want to talk about the storm surge on the western side of the state, because the wind direction is going to be a problem. So when we look at Helene moving up the coast, the winds are going to initially almost be due south, obviously. And I'll space these out a little bit easier for you guys as well here. So give me just 1 second. Let me just take those out just a little bit inside. Okay, so you can clearly see that. But as Helene moves north, the winds are going to turn out of the southwest. And that's going to be a problem, because now you've got the perfect wind orientation, unfortunately, to drive the water up to Charlotte Harbor, to drive the water deep into Tampa Bay itself with a very strong wind. And these aren't going to be light winds that are going to be coming through as well, right? We showed it yesterday. Kind of initially, these winds are going to probably be in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range before they weaken. But that westerly component to the wind as Helene tracks north and behind Helene, even to the Nature Coast, and then obviously into the Big Bend area, is going to be extremely problematic. It's a bad wind direction. Up the East Coast, it's going to be more paralleling, but then as it gets up towards, again, the Volusia Flagler County line, there should be a little bit of an easterly push to the wind. Along the East Coast, I would expect some high tides. I would expect some beach erosion, probably some dune problems as well, just more in a sporadic variety rather than just pushing a huge wall of water in like the West Coast could see. But again, it's a very problematic wind direction as Helene stays off the West Coast of Florida and works its way up to the north. So I wanted to mention that as well. So I think that we've covered basically everything with Helene as we speak. If you wouldn't mind taking a brief second, if you've gotten something out of this video, if you could just do me a quick favor and like the video, I wholeheartedly appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing to Meteo Mundo. Thank you for sharing this with your family and friends. And I do appreciate those who have found a way to support me at the channel via our memberships. That's the join button, 99 cents a month, the super thanks, and other ways that you can support me here at the channel. You can find that in the description below. Now we're going to get into what's going to be happening here with the rest of the Caribbean. Going to take me 1 second here. I need to switch one thing. Perfect. It's going to just allow me to loop this back up. So obviously, all eyes are on what's going to be happening with Helene. And I mentioned again that even Jamaica could get back into some wet weather. And my friends in Jamaica have let me know that the rain has been generally beneficial, right? There could still be some pockets of heavy rain and some flooding going on in some areas. The impacts of Helene will start to be lesser later today, and then especially starting tomorrow morning. So we kind of have our last gasp of moisture in the far southeast side of Helene hitting Jamaica. The Cayman Islands and north and west will still be impacted by Helene at least through this evening, if not overnight. Still gets to be some banding and feeder activity coming in on the far southeast side, central and western Cuba on that. We'll actually start to see the weather get a little bit quieter, quicker, western sides of the storm, so that does include Quintana Roo. It's been okay in Belize City, and we've had a few storms trying to sneak their way back into Roatan and the coastal islands of Honduras. But again, generally speaking, we're doing better here on the south and the western side of the storm. Not expecting a ton of rain except for isolated activity here in the Dominican Republic and Haiti for today. Same thing for Puerto Rico, but we're starting to see a shear line and a trough overall bring more widespread showers and storms to the Lesser Antilles. And I did want to highlight this as well. For Trinidad, for Grenada, for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, St. Lucia, Martinique, you got it, guys. Dominica, already some showers and storms. Guadeloupe, already some hefty showers and storms. Montserrat, Antigua, Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius, St. Bart, St. Martin, Anguilla, Anegada, Virgin Gorda, Yost, Van Dyke, St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, Culebra, Vieques, Puerto Rico. Hope I got everyone. You guys are going to have some decent shower and storm chances here the remainder of this Wednesday. It's still not going to be extremely concentrated, but it is more widespread than what it has been. Here is the visible satellite imagery of this. You can see this shear line or this trough coming through. You can see those brighter white cloud tops here. You can see the live lightning data here at Meteo Mundo. When I click that button, the number of lightning strikes comes back on. So decent showers and storms in this area, and this is going to try and work its way through Puerto Rico. So although it's isolated right now, we can already see a few lightning strikes beginning to develop. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be good beneficial rain to try and cool things off, get you guys a little bit of rain that you so desperately need in most areas. Places like Barbados, which have had some healthy rain totals lately, still could see some flood watches or even flood warnings hoisted, so keep a local eye on for that. And again, some decent storm activity across the entire island chain, generally working its way to the north and to the west. If I show you guys the models here real quickly, we'll go back over to the reflectivity. And let me bring this back down to kind of the initial time. And I loop this up and then take off the satellite data obviously as well. You can see again, we're going to be spinning in some rain for the remainder of Wednesday into Thursday and Friday. Let me get the satellite or the lightning data off as well. Apologize for that. But again, healthy rain chances here. And this will be traversing its way out into the central side of the Caribbean. So we're going to even try and skirt some showers for Nueva Esparta, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. We'll at least have an opportunity. The bulk of that rain may stay just to the north of the ABC Islands. But again, for the entire island chain, Lesser Antilles here, the Leeward Islands in general, Anguilla, Antigua, Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis and St. Martin, solid rain chances the rest of this Wednesday into portions of Thursday. We'll start to dry out again on Friday. Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique would be included in that. St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. We already talked about Trinidad and Tobago, on over towards the British and the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and then obviously that moisture just traverses west. So the Dominican Republic and Haiti get into better rain chances late Thursday as well. And even some of this activity, even on the heels of Helene, could work its way back into the Western Caribbean. So that's what I'm going to be monitoring in those areas. But of course, obviously the big story in the short term is what's going on with Helene. Again, friends, you can follow us across all of social media, and I appreciate that support on the other platforms. TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook. You want to send me a picture or video, especially if you're in the path of Helene. Obviously, that's going to be the focus here until Helene moves on shore. It's myMediaMundo@gmail.com. Remember, I'm live tonight, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We're chatting, friends. I'm taking your questions. We're going to be looking at what's happening with Helene on Wednesday evening, and then obviously talking about the newest details, the newest changes to any track changes, any intensity changes, and getting the Gulf Coast prepared for what's going to be a very intense Thursday across that area. I hope you'll join me then. Thank you for liking this video. Thank you for subscribing. Friends, have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'll see you live tonight, right around 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, right here at Meteo Mundo.